Silent Hill 2 is a horror game from 2001 that I first played when I was a teenager. It's my personal favorite video game. I could talk about why this game is perfect for the rest of my life and probably never run out of praise for it. If you haven't already played it for yourself, you may be curious to try it out, but I've got bad news for you. Very recently, Silent Hill 2 became something else, something different. A new horror game from 2024. When it was first announced that Silent Hill 2 would be getting a remake, I was not happy about it. I think it was at that moment that I put up a metaphorical wall in my head. This wall made it difficult for me to enjoy the game as much as I think I could have. Although it is genuinely really good, it just isn't Silent Hill 2. It was never going to be that for me. Silent Hill 2 is a horror game from 2001 that I first played when I was a teenager. There's just something special about Silent Hill 2 that can't quite be replicated. Silent Hill 2 is a PS2 game. It feels like a PS2 game, and that's part of its identity. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. The game design doesn't need upgrading. The voice acting doesn't need fixing. The only thing it needs is to be accessible to players as close to unchanged as possible. No one would dare try to remake Citizen Kane. You just make Citizen Kane more accessible. My bias is so obvious and apparent that it's giving me an actual headache. Ignoring for a moment that Silent Hill 2 is my favorite game, I've just always had a preference for older tech. I'm 25 goddamn years old and I grew up playing the Nintendo Entertainment System. I would record songs from computer speakers onto cassette tapes so that I could listen to them on my Walkman. I watched movies in full screen on VHS, by choice, on purpose. We had widescreen. We had DVDs. So needless to say, I never liked remakes. I've always hated remakes. I just don't think a remake could ever be better than the original. Like, fundamentally. The original always did it first, and that has to count for something. Silent Hill 2 is important to the canon of horror games. It had an impact on the genre that has to count for something. I don't believe that smoothing the edges and making a prettier, less clunky and outdated product necessarily means making a better game, a better work of art. Before playing the Silent Hill 2 remake, I decided to play the Resident Evil 2 remake. When it first came out in 2019, I didn't really want anything to do with it, but since then, I've heard nothing but great things about it, so I figured it would be good to play it before the Silent Hill 2 remake came out as an example of a best-case scenario for a remake. Now, you have to understand, I love Resident Evil 2. I first played it on the Nintendo 64 when I was young and just starting to dip my toes into horror. Probably one of the first games I ever actually saw the credits on. I enjoyed the remake, sure, but it'll never be better than the original. Look, I really fell in love with the pre-rendered backgrounds and tank controls and campy dialogue. That's a good question. Would I have felt differently about the Resident Evil 2 remake if it had been more like the original with tank controls and fixed camera? Like, what about the Resident Evil remake on GameCube? People love that game, and I love that game. I do love that game, but it still isn't better than the original. It may be better looking, better sounding, or even more fun to play. But those are just opinions. The original is iconic and important to the genre. So therefore, it'll always be better in some sense.
What? I don't even think I truly believe that. What do you mean by better? Better at what? Better for who? Does a remake even need to be better? Can't they simply both exist? Maybe people can like them both.
Okay. Maybe a remake doesn't need to be better, but then it still is an act of disrespect towards the original that a remake exists at all. A remake's very existence is an attempt to replace the original in some meaningful way. If you want to play Silent Hill 2 now, the easiest way will be to buy the remake, but they aren't the same. How can the remake respect the original if it is also replacing it? If you Google Resident Evil 2 right now, the results will mostly be related to the remake.
Is that disrespect? To be currently more relevant than the original? What difference does it make? Why does the remake need to respect the original at all, and who decides by what metric we measure respect? Is it disrespectful to attempt to make an older work more accessible to new players? The remake may even bring new players to the original who never would have tried it.
On the other hand, many people who might have one day played the original are going to see the remake and decide to play that instead. You only get to experience the story for the first time once. If new players get to the original after the remake, they already know how things go. Like watching a movie after someone tells you the ending.
I wonder if I would feel differently about these games if they made more of an effort to stand apart from the originals. Like, the Final Fantasy VII Remake is created to be more of a companion piece to the original, so it diverges pretty wildly, I've been told. I'm not sure though, I've never played it personally.
I think Final Fantasy VII Remake is a special case because it really isn't just a remake. It's also like a pseudo-sequel, a little bit of both. Maybe I wouldn't have such a problem with remakes if they were titled differently. Like, why is the Silent Hill 2 remake called Silent Hill 2 instead of anything else? Like Silent Hill Restless Dreams, or Silent Hill Sunderland, or anything else. It really does feel like the desire is to overshadow the original, to replace it. Take a look at Silent Hill Shattered Memories. That's a remake of the original Silent Hill, and it doesn't ever feel like an attempt to replace the original.
Come on, Shattered Memories is barely a remake. If you played the original Silent Hill, and then immediately afterward played Shattered Memories, you would never be able to tell that it was supposed to be a remake.
No, but that is exactly what I'm talking about. I mean, remakes are at their best when they're not even exactly remakes. Like, Resident Evil 2 Remake is already so different from the original. They completely reinvented the combat, movement, camera perspective, essentially the whole game. That had already been done with Umbrella Chronicles and Darkside Chronicles for the Wii. No one tried to name those games after the originals they were based on. They followed the same story and events, but changed the combat, movement, and camera.
No, those games are not the same. You don't even have the freedom to walk around in those games. Those are on-rail shooter spin-offs. The Resident Evil 2 remake is still a third-person shooter with limited inventory space that prioritizes item management and backtracking to create tension and scares. The remake stays more true to the essence of what made Resident Evil 2 good to begin with.
Does it, though? Is Resident Evil 2 over the shoulder or fixed camera? Is Resident Evil 2 from 1998 or 2019? Is Resident Evil 2 soundtrack memorable and iconic or subtle and forgettable? These games wouldn't invite comparison as much if they had different titles.
What about games that are not remakes but still share a title with a previous game? Mortal Kombat 2011, Doom 2016, God of War 2018.
All of those games upset me as well. They should have had different titles.
But I love those games. I got Mortal Kombat 2011 on release day. I played it until the disc stopped working. A rose by any other name would smell as sweet.
Oh God, shut up. Oh, you couldn't sound more pretentious if you tried. Sure, those games are all good, but it still feels wrong. Naming a game that way is unethical, and stealing the identity of another work is wrong. You can forgive Mortal Kombat 2011 and Doom 2016 because they only share a name with the originals, but Resident Evil 2 Remake is basically committing wholesale identity fraud. It is wrong.
But it doesn't sound like a genuine concern anymore. It sounds like a pet peeve, like a weird hang-up that makes it come off like we have a stick up our ass. Does it make you happy to harsh people's vibe? Do you just enjoy ruining people's fun, or is it the act of policing how others should engage with art?
I just love these games, and I want others to see in them what I see in them. Look at Dark Souls, for instance. The remaster didn't change much of anything except making it run better and bundling the DLC with it. The game became accessible to more players than ever before. Then Demon's Souls was given the remake treatment, and now the original Demon's Souls is harder than ever to experience.
But where do you draw the line? Like the ship of Theseus, when does it become a new boat? Dark Souls Remastered added several quality of life changes, but you said it yourself, these games don't need fixing or updating. What changes are ethical and unethical? Why is the Demon's Souls remake worse just because it's different than how you first experienced it?
This isn't about me. The visuals were created that way for a reason. The new visuals ignore the original intention and change the atmosphere, which was one of the best things about the original Demon's Souls.
But that isn't up to you to decide. We can still play the original Resident Evil 2 and Silent Hill 2, and many other people will play the remakes instead and get a lot out of them. How can we judge them for that? Is it just because you're afraid of being forgotten? You're just terrified that everybody's moving on without you.
What? I just love Silent Hill 2 so much and want to share it with people. When I see a new game parading around in the skin of a work that I hold in such high regard, it makes me angry. When I think of all the players who will inevitably argue that the new one is better because it has a higher frame rate and no tank controls, I get defensive. I like tank controls.
And other people don't like tank controls. People have always had issues with tank controls. They don't make games just for us, you know. Are we really getting too old to appreciate anything that I didn't discover when I was in high school?
It doesn't matter when it came out, or even my personal feelings about the original. I genuinely just think I dislike remakes on principle. Remember, we didn't even play Demon's Souls for the first time until after the remake came out. That couldn't have had anything to do with personal bias.
We just like older shit. We see a thing as being more commercial or having less artistic value because it came later. But it isn't worse just because it's new.
Hey, I like plenty of new things, okay? Games, movies, music, books. There are too many works to count every year that are brand new and that I fall in love with. I love things that are new and unique. I just don't appreciate when people try to fix works that were already loved to begin with.
Have you ever considered that no one is trying to fix anything? Sometimes artists just want to copy things that they love. Sometimes artists want to put their own spin on a story that they love and maybe be a part of its legacy. I mean, what about The Blob? The 1988 remake of The Blob is one of my favorite movies, and I've never even seen the original.
I do love The Blob. Pretty massive blind spot in hindsight.
Are we that afraid of change? So what if Silent Hill 2's legacy is a little confused by the remake? You won't forget what it means to you, and now it'll mean something else to some people. Change is good.
I don't know why everybody always says that. It's not even true. Change is not that good. Why fix what isn't broken? Everyone was here, and everything was good, and then people changed, and situations changed, and then things got worse. And then I'm alone.
Things are only worse because you didn't change too. You just tried so hard to stay the same and keep your life in stasis, but everybody else moved on. You can move on too, I know you can, because I'm ready to move on. I'm letting go of all of that.
What if things are never as good as they were before? What if getting older is just losing things and losing people? What if things change for the worse?
What if they change for the better? Okay. I'm letting go.
The shop is new. The parking lot grew. There used to be a tree where we'd hide and smoke weed. I went to school. I got my first job. I learned to lie. I learned to cheat. I learned to leave. The sky's the same, the streets don't change, it's just my brain. Can we make those years seem nice if we squint our eyes? All we ever do is try not to go backwards.